Omer, ready?
Action.
Action! Okay, so today we are going to talk about how to get into DevOps for people who are not from this field, from this area. So, hi Omer.
How are you?
I'm good, how are you?
I'm great, and I have a question before you start. I
go
had
ahead.
this idea this week, and I saw some really cool stuff as every week on the internet. But I wanted to ask you, what's the most recent interesting tool in our field related to what we do that you got to see and like sparked your mind or something, if you have something like that?
I think I recently played again with Grafana.
Okay.
Again, I mean,
Okay.
got back into it again to dig inside Grafana, dug inside Grafana again. So, why do you ask that? What's the question?
I asked that because I had a good answer for it, of course.
Yeah, so what?
Because I had a tool in mind. But since you
Okay.
talked about Grafana, I also recently got to upgrade it, and the latest version is so much better than the previous one, and I love it. So
Which version? 8? Is there something more than 8?
it's either 7 point something or 8, but very close to that. And the
Okay.
one we were using before was 6.3. The reason was
Okay.
it couldn't work behind the proxy, all kinds of weird stuff. Anyway, we solved the issue, and now we can work behind the proxy, and we upgraded to the latest, and it's amazing. But
See how funny it is? We are talking about how to get into DevOps, and we just dove,
Yeah.
dove, right? I think right into Grafana, and people
Maybe
don't
it's a
even know
word.
what's Grafana, so it's crazy. Yeah, dove. I don't think there's a dived, so I think it's dove or whatever. So,
So I wanted to tell you about something really cool that I saw today.
Sure.
So I don't know if you know or not, Docker is the main runtime for containers in the world. EKS or Kubernetes in general are slowly ditching that in favor of containerd, and there's lots of tooling around that. To build a Docker container, a container image, regardless of what runtime it's going to run on, what you normally use is a Docker file. So that's kind of a template that describes what's going to happen, what's my first layer that I'm borrowing from, environment variables, arguments, commands, etc., etc. There is a way, however, to use a tool that's called BuildPack. And apparently that's been used in GitHub and GitLab for automation, and that automatically analyzes what you have in the current directory. Based on that, assumes what's the layers you're going to need, and then you can just run pack build some name. It assumes what you're going to need and builds an image. That's it. No Docker file, no nothing. So it was pretty amazing. There are a few caveats, okay? It wouldn't be the leanest image in the world. You can probably do it better. But for the sake of automation and simplicity, just running one line, no Docker file, no nothing, that was mind-blowing.
I'll need a use case for that, some real life scenario where I'm actually going to use it, other than saying, wow, that's cool. So I want to see use case for actually
let's
doing
not
that.
go too deep, but for example, GitLab has their GitLab DevOps, which is a platform that supports other applications, and that supposedly is going to help them automatically deploy to the cloud. How would they know what's going to happen? How would they know what to build to? How would they generate a Docker file? They won't. They'll just assume based on that and deploy that. So it's pretty cool. You can get a basic Docker file with Go for like 170, 150 megabytes. It's not the best. You can probably do far better, but it works. That's pretty cool.
Hey, so it generates a Docker file or it generates a Docker image?
It generates a container image that you can run with Docker or containerd, whatever you want.
Okay, I thought it's like, generating automatically a Docker file. That would be cool
No.
because then you can also customize it, so you get the initial template and then you can play with it. That sounds like a good idea.
Not the case though.
Not the case though. Okay, so BuildPack, that's the tool. So again, starting again from scratch, okay?
Yeah.
How to get into DevOps.
All right. How to get into
Except
DevOps.
from learning everything that you can learn, how to get into DevOps. So when we say that, Omer, what comes up in your mind when I say, Omer, I want to get into DevOps? What should I do? Where should I start from? And let's assume that I'm quite familiar with being a developer. Like I'm a developer, okay? Because if I'm coming, from the street or stuff, or if I'm not from this field, so learning DevOps is probably nothing to me. But if I'm a developer and I want to get into DevOps, so how do I start? What should I do?
I need to be a dad for a second and walk ourselves a little bit back and speak of what is DevOps in general, right? Because we say DevOps all the time and nobody really knows what it is. So without going too deep, DevOps is a methodology. It shouldn't be a role. For example, what we do in our day-to-day, that should be called ops. And what developers do, it's called developer or a programmer or whatever. And then you have this fusion of taking the ops guys that handle the cloud and automation and CI/CD or whatever, and then you fuse that with development and you get DevOps, which should be some kind of way to implement things together. People kind of messed it up, and ops turned into DevOps, and that's what you call the role and the job, but that's essentially what it is. Now I'm going to my opinionated idea of what DevOps is, or what an engineer rather should have when they try to get into DevOps. Again, air quotes. I think you have two qualities that you need to have, and that's the only two qualities I care about. One is motivation. You need to be super motivated, just because the amount of data, tools, platforms, languages, stuff you're going to learn is indescribable. It's going to blow your mind every week.
Yeah, we didn't even start the session and we started talking about new tools.
For example, yeah. And it's really endless. Every 5 minutes you see something new. It's quicker than JavaScript frameworks. It's just on and on and on and on. So one, motivation, and the other one, which is hard to frame, but that's potential. Potential is hard for me to configure, or rather put words onto it, but it's kind of being a hacker. It's loving the idea of using a terminal, of using a CLI, of working with servers, on trying to break things, trying to go under the hood and understand what's going on there, and being able to work with things you don't necessarily know. Skim through docs, find new technologies, learn new stuff on the go as a method of work. Right? Not as something you do every once in a while. That was a little bit of a rant, I think.
Let me add to that,
Yeah,
all right? Let
yeah.
me add another quality. I'd say I would hire someone according to the speed of learning, the way they learn and the speed they learn. Like if they learn fast.
Totally.
So I don't care
Totally
about what you know right now. I don't care about what you know right now. I care about how fast can you learn something new, because that's probably what's going to happen next week. So I don't care what you know right now.
That is a perfect addition, by the way. That's perfect you said it, because sometimes when we hire people and when we interview them, I don't care if you know that technology or another. I really don't. Well, specifically, if you come to me now, we're working on a platform that's solely on AWS. If you don't know AWS, nothing about it, that would probably be a problem. But I don't really care if you know Python or JavaScript or wrote only in Bash, or you know that CI/CD tool or another. I really don't care. I need to know that you have the ability, and that's what I test, by the way, that you have the ability to deal with something you probably never saw before. Mm-hmm. So exactly what you said. Now,
wait, let's add more.
Yeah,
documentation. But inspired by you, dude. That's inspiring. Inspired by you. So documentation.
Yeah.
I love to see the way people document their process. So if you solve something, I want to make sure you know how to solve it again if you encountered it again. So you must document the process, and you must put, references and everything. So in case we see this issue again, you go back to Jira, you search for it, and voila, you found the issue that you already solved a while ago. So that's very important to me, at least, again, inspired by you.
Right. So again,
So
these are all qualities, but our topic is how do we actually start? How do we get into it? Which is hard to pinpoint, but let me say this. There are probably things you can prefer and learn over others. For example, you probably, in the modern era, if you're not going to work for some company that works on servers in the level -2 of their building, you want to work in the cloud, and you probably want to start interacting with one of the major clouds. Preference of choice, AWS, biggest one. It's ubiquitous. It's everywhere. Everybody uses it. You probably have bigger chances of landing your first job using AWS rather than some other cloud platform. That's just to begin with. So I'd go for AWS. Other technologies are probably based on the company that you're going to work with. And for that, I'm going to say, start by learning the concepts. Understand what a CI/CD is, understand what a container is, what is a container orchestration. If you just Google in YouTube, what does it mean to be a DevOps engineer, or look for DevOps roadmap on Google, you'd find tons of technologies. You don't need to know all of them. That's probably depends on the place you're going to. You do want to know the concepts. You need to know what infrastructure as code is. You can probably add tons of them. But that's the general idea of what I wanted to say.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so let's just say don't just go ahead and start learning Kubernetes, because if you just go ahead and start learning Kubernetes, that's missing the whole point. So first you should start learning, let's say, Docker or about containers, because Kubernetes is a container orchestrator. It's only one implementation of orchestrating
Let
containers.
me tell you something amazing.
Yeah, go ahead.
It feels like Kubernetes is everywhere and everybody are using it. Which to a certain degree, that's probably right. I have an amazing engineer friend who's a DevOps engineer for years. He taught me a big part of everything I know in my first job. I just spoke to him this morning and we talked about Kubernetes and said, dude, I've never touched Kubernetes, not to this day. He's specifically working with ECS, but it doesn't matter. Not everyone are working with Kubernetes, exactly like you said. Don't jump straight to it. Not as a company, not as an engineer, and certainly not as a newcomer to the industry.
Okay, and also, Omer, I have a confession about getting into DevOps. Okay, so
you started from Kubernetes, didn't you?
I know Kubernetes, but if you knew how less I know that I would expect me to know. Okay, so I know Kubernetes as like I know what are nodes, pods, deployments, all the basic stuff. But I mean, I think only after a few months that I already deployed a cluster and did the whole shebang of infrastructure as code with bringing up a Kubernetes cluster with Terraform and everything. So only after that, I started learning about admission controller and webhooks and HCD and everything else. So I didn't really know Kubernetes like the underlying infrastructure only until I brought everything up and everything worked, So I learned it I think a bit differently. Usually people learn everything, from scratch. Learn on the basics of the infra and then...
by the way, you mentioned things like the admission controller in Kubernetes. I bet that 70% of the engineers that either listening to this or are working with Kubernetes day to day don't even have an idea it exists. You can go so many ways so quickly and you can get lost.
But there are the basics. So if you tell someone that you learned Kubernetes and I tell you that I didn't even know, I only knew that etcd like stores secrets, or not secrets, like key store for Kubernetes, internal stuff. That's the only thing that I knew about it. But only after a very, very few months, I actually read more about it because I didn't care. It just worked.
So let's not make it a Kubernetes discussion. Sure. But again, Kubernetes is a big world like everything else. Even Kubernetes is built with different SIGs. It's called interest groups, right? It's different interest groups. Every chunk of the system is being built in an isolated environment on their own. They don't have any idea how the other components are working, and it's completely distributed. So don't jump straight into things. That said, and I'm back to the idea of trying to land your first role. You can play at home with anything. I think 90-something% of everything we do day to day is based on open source software. Look at companies like HashiCorp, work with GitLab, even Kubernetes that we just talked about. Everything is open source. You can install tools in your computer right now, follow tutorials, use YouTube, use free platforms. You don't have to spend any money and just learn the tools. If you're going to interview for a certain company, it's pretty easy to find out using engineers, LinkedIn, whatever, people you talk to in the industry, understand what more or less are they working with, and understand how to guide yourself through this roadmap you're building for yourself. You can install everything, work locally. And one more tip I have that I don't think a lot of people use: since everything is open source, you can find yourself contributing to something, work with a certain tool, try to take, you want to install, I don't know, we just talked about BuildPacks, right? BuildPack obviously is an open source tool. It has surrounding tooling around it, like Kpack by Pivotal, I think. Anyway, search for it on GitLab or GitHub rather. Try working with it locally. If you like the product and you find something that isn't perfect, even if it's just the README, contribute, show that your GitHub profile has something, make contributions, maybe even build a feature, maybe build your own product, play with code.
But don't abuse. I hate the abusers. Some people are trying to contribute just to contribute, not really to contribute. You know what I mean? I
want to believe that they'll merge your contribution only if it makes sense.
I hate that. There are a lot of people that I see even to my repositories. They're just saying like, you have a typo. So instead of like opening an issue, they create a pull request. And then you're like, I don't know. I don't know. So why? Because you want to appear as a contributor on a repo?
I don't mind,
It's
by the
like,
way. I'll take typos from anyone. It looks like I had a lot of help. I'm fine with that.
It depends. It really depends. You know, if you see, and then when you check like about the person's profile and you see that that's what he does, you know, fixing typos in other repositories. So you're like, dude, I mean, dude, you know. All right. I want to add another tip. So it's like getting back to what I said about etcd, about how I didn't need to know about it. So to me, like, you can learn about something, but you don't really need to learn everything about it, because sometimes it's overwhelming. And I'll even say my experience when I first got into ProdOps, you know, and you told me, listen, you should use Vim, okay? You should use Vim. So my background was with Visual Studio Code. So what happened is I tried to learn, for example, Terraform. Okay, and while doing that, I used Vim. So I couldn't do anything because I just tried to edit a file and it just didn't work because I had to press I and then escape and then it got me crazy. So concentrate on what you need to learn and what you want to learn. You know, sometimes tools and editors or maybe even friends can tell you to learn something else other than you need. So learn what you need to learn and what you want to learn. Okay,
that's one of the most important tips you can think of, and I call it don't throw yourself into too many pools. We have a mutual friend engineer. I'm pretty sure you know who I'm talking about. He's working with me now, and we did the exact same thing. He started working with like 4 or 5 different technologies, and he's just shooting all around, and it's hard. It's too much to take in. Throw yourself into the waters of one pool first with all the surrounding technology you already know. Do that. I mean, if you're an engineer starting out and you want to learn something like Python, I'm starting out with Python now. Do a course. Don't change your IDE. Don't try playing with new computers and operating systems and move to Linux because it's cool. Use Python. Study the language, understand the basics, move on step by step. Once you feel comfortable with Python, you can now move to a different IDE and maybe to a new operating system, etc., etc. And take what we said, like the concept you just mentioned, and apply it to everything, especially if you want to get into this field. Definitely.
And also about learning, okay, another thing like how to get into DevOps. So if you try to learn everything from scratch, you probably won't make it. So everything that you learn is probably based on something else that you have already learned. Okay, which is also the same for languages. So what we talked about a few sessions ago, I told you, I know Terraform. So if I learn Packer, which is based also on, by HashiCorp.
Using HCL, yes.
Yeah, so it was very easy to me. So I remembered how I'm using the HashiCorp language, the Terraform language, and then I applied it on Packer. So everything that you learn, try always to do those transfers. So if you know Kubernetes and you want to transfer to ECS, always try searching for those tutorials also that's saying, okay, so ECS, a service is like a Kubernetes deployment, and an ingress is like creating an application load balancer in ECS.
I can be a little bit nerd and say that it's kind of like container layers.
Yeah,
you're
go
building
ahead.
on top of stuff. You're using the cache that you already have in your back of your brain and using that cache in order to build something new.
That's exactly what I'm doing, and I think it makes my whole learning process easier to consume new technologies, because to me it's like, it's not really new. It's just a different syntax, because if I know the concept, if I know ECS, I'll probably get into Kubernetes. It will be
definitely
okay-ish.
Yeah.
Okay. So we need to remember what we just said. We need to make a conclusion about it all. Do you want to start doing the recap of what we just did?
I'll try, although I think we concluded together that I'm not really good at it. So you need to help me. Okay?
Okay.
We started by, we wanted to help people get into the industry, let them land their first job with DevOps or learn the concept. So we started by saying, don't try to jump on everything. Pick something and then just go through it. Pick a map, make a roadmap for yourself and try building it slowly. Learn the concepts. If you want to choose a cloud platform, probably AWS. You want to have a lot of motivation because you're going to go through a lot of technologies, not only now, but always. That's the role. Learning new technologies, learning new languages. It's going to go and it's probably going to build up and be even more loaded. So that potential, which is not something we can, put a number on, but that's just something you want to have because you want to have good potential. You want to have a lot of motivation. You added the speed in which you want to be able to pick up new technologies or new ideas, concepts, whatever, pick up new things and run with them. You also mentioned that it's not good to jump too deep, too far, to too many things. You want to be this kind of hacker mindset where I only take what I need, I run with that, and then I go back and pick up more things, but I'm doing it always step by step and building on top of things I already have in the back of my mind or my memory or whatever. Don't jump into too many things. I think that's correct for everything. You don't want to multitask. So that's, of course, it's even correct
We
for
only have
learning.
one core, only one core.
Yeah, exactly. one core, which is, by the way, hardware from 10,000 years ago. It hasn't evolved since. So pretty old. Don't load too much onto it. I think that's it.
I think that's it. I think you summed up correctly and precisely. And if not, people can just, go back and listen to what we just said.
All right. Short and concise.
Okay. Thank you, amigo. See you next time.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Bye.